For an absurdly cheap price, this 1994 Honda Pacific Coast landed in my garage. It was a bit of a wreck. Some ape hadn't bothered to read the manual and had tried to reassemble the bodywork, breaking many of the tabs and panels in the process. Yet somewhere under all that plastic was a good motorcycle. Let's tidy it up a bit and see what it's like. Although my first ride on a Pacific Coast a few years back hadn't thrilled me, I have this thing about strange and unusual motorbikes, the ugly ducklings of the motorcycle world. With a fresh, new safety certificate in hand, it was time to see what it was like, both on paved and my favourite back roads. It didn't take long to discover that it's a stable, easy-to-manage machine, and to my great surprise the plastic panels didn't rattle, even when the road surface got a bit bouncy. The engine seemed to run well, the gears were smooth, the seat was comfortable. It was time for a longer test. I hadn't done my annual pilgrimage to Northern Ontario yet this year, so I packed a trunk with my hammock, sleeping bag and various other bits and pieces and set off towards Temagami, about 350 miles away. It was major highways most of the way up, so I won't bore you with that, but as you get further north there are some fine views, even from roadside.
So all's not entirely perfect in Honda world. On the way up here, I'm in Temagami in Northern Ontario, and on the way up here, running at about 4,500 RPM, if I slackened off the throttle I could feel some missing. Just occasionally. It was more like I was running into a strong wind, but it felt like a misfire.
I'm always amazed that I get any sleep at all in my hammock, but I was up and moving early for Elk Lake and Matachewan. But first I needed to find fuel. I was getting close to empty, and I knew the next section I was hoping to ride was both remote and completely unserviced. Maps may show the road west as the numbered Highway 566, but I'd ridden part of it a few years back and had a good idea of what to expect. The gas pump only accepted credit and debit cards, and after an attempt to infiltrate my bank, my cards were on lockdown, so I only had cash. No matter. The kind lady at the store used her MasterCard, then I paid her in cash. It's about 40 miles along Highway 566 to a road junction south to Shining Tree. The first part was easy riding. Just a pleasant gravel road snaking through the forest, with the occasional pond and wetland. It was a beautiful day, warm but not too hot. A perfect day for a ride in the bush. A few miles further on I stopped briefly at the side of this pond, but all was quiet apart from a few crickets chirping. Another few miles and I came to a junction, 63 kilometres to Timmins to the north and an old logging road to the south. My turn off to the south was still many twists and turns away. From this point on, it started to look as though they were intending to improve the road. The brush had been cut back, but so far the road surface was untouched. A few more miles, the road narrowed and the brush cutting finished. It doesn't look too bad in the video, but there were areas of bone-shaking washboard, steep down slopes with cobbles and washout channels, and some short uphill sections of loose gravel studded with bigger rocks. I tilted the windscreen visor because I found, while avoiding potholes and loose areas, I was getting distortion and not seeing the road surface properly. Nevertheless, the Pacific coast handled it all remarkably well, never causing me any anxiety. I might have had second thoughts about trying to muscle my Suzuki Cavalcade along this section, but really, any decent road bike could manage it without complaint. The only issue is that you're far from help if something does go wrong. I did see one pickup truck while riding this part, but if you or the bike breaks, it could be a long wait for rescue. Still, what's life without a little risk? I prefer to take my chances. There was plenty more of this, some better, some worse. I stopped from time to time to check my map, but of course with no signal, the information available was limited. I knew the turn-off to Shining Tree would appear sooner or later. It was just a case of plugging on. Eventually I made the turn south, stopping where the road crosses the grassy river at Grassy Lake. I was here once before, coming south from Timmins. I stopped then too. When I started off again, my clutch cable broke just as a large black bear crossed the road ahead of me. I had a spare cable, but I grabbed one that was too short, so instead of routing it properly, I had to lay it across the tank. Oh well, it got me home. And then, suddenly, my quiet back road turned into an ugly gravel active haul road. The first truck took me by surprise, although I suspect the driver was just as shocked as I was. After that, I was ready for them, and I suspect the drivers had been chatting on the radio, as from then on they weren't hammering along quite as fast as usual. That dust completely eliminates your visibility for a while and is nasty choking stuff. I couldn't get off that road fast enough.
So here's the thing. The battery isn't charging. Don't know why. Maybe the alternator isn't functioning properly. Anyway, I just bought a little battery charger to pump up the battery, and that should be able to get me home. I got the bike parked quite close to the motel room, and the lead coming through the door and up into the wall.
In the end, I pulled the fuse for the headlights, but once I got to a town, I bought a cheap thing to measure the voltage, finding that the battery was sitting happily at 12.8 volts, so clearly charging. I put the lights fuse back in and rode the rest of the way home. Why the bike chose to act as though it had a flattened battery when I've pulled in for gas, I don't know, but it's been running just fine ever since. It's mysterious. Bikes are sometimes mysterious. But hey, it was a good trip, and a little thing like that isn't enough to stop my enjoyment. Please like, subscribe, or leave a comment, preferably all three. Better yet, take a crack at some of my books. They're available on Amazon in Kindle, paperback and audiobook formats. Thanks for watching.